So while a new person is dying every minute from COVID-19 across the country, the President of the United States isn't wasting any time on that issue and instead is apparently focusing on undermining our democracy in a pre-recorded speech he posted last night to Facebook. And while Trump called his 46-minute rambling the most important speech he's ever made, the Washington Post called it the most petulant 46 minutes in American history. CNN referred to it as a propaganda video, MSNBC an infomercial of lies, and Esquire went with a straightforward headline, "My God, he's completely insane." Here's just a bit of it.
It is statistically impossible that the person, me, that led the charge lost. Tens of millions of ballots sent to unknown recipients. Millions of votes were cast illegally in the swing states alone. And if that's the case, the results of the individual swing states must be overturned, and overturned immediately. If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
But he's not right. He's shown no proof. Even the ordinarily sycophantic Attorney General, Bill Barr, won't back Trump on this one. And since Biden is going to be president in 7 weeks, he's focusing on the serious work of his transition, including installing key aides, nominating cabinet officials, working on his own pandemic response plan, and getting ready to navigate major issues in the world stage, such as Iran now vowing to speed up its nuclear program after its top scientist was recently assassinated. I'm joined by Ambassador Wendy Sherman, who led U.S. nuclear negotiations with Iran and served as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs under Obama. She's now director of the Harvard Kennedy School's Center for Public Leadership and author of Not for the Faint of Heart, Lessons in Courage, Power, and Persistence. Wendy, it's good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Jim, and with your viewers.
Thank you. You know, in an act of incredible masochism, I watched all 46 minutes of this video. And what I'd like you to do is forget that it's the President of the United States. You see a world leader who lost an election, says he was cheated, it was stolen from him. As a diplomat, what would your response be to such a pronouncement?
It would be very, very concerning, particularly if I was a citizen living in a country where we have surging COVID, where there are issues of concern to get our economy back, to deal with the issues of justice in our society, and to make sure that we can keep Americans safe from threats from abroad, including such things as what we're going to talk about, Iran getting a nuclear weapon, or China's competition, or climate change.
Well, you know, continuing with that theme just for a second, you're a world leader watching this. You know that it appears that Trump is going to announce his candidacy for 2024. You hear what you just heard a couple of minutes ago. You know that bipartisanship is a thing of the past. How do you trust the United States in negotiations? How do you trust someone like you or Antony Blinken, likely to be Secretary of State, or Linda Thomas Greenfield, the ambassador to the UN? Why should anybody deal with them?
Well, these are, first of all, the team that the president-elect's putting together is incredibly competent, professional, seasoned, strong, with resolve, care about the American people, want to look after their interests first and foremost. So I think we're lucky. The president-elect has a very deep and wide bench to choose from. So I think we're going to have a phenomenal team. Most of them know people around the world quite well. So they will be able to reestablish relationships. But we're going to have to work hard at this because we have lost credibility. We are seen as weaker. One of the things that the president-elect has said is that he wants to build back America better, that he wants to create jobs for the future, the infrastructure, be able to compete with China. He wants to deal with climate. He wants to make sure that the middle class is taken care of. Jake Sullivan, who's going to be the national security advisor, said in his remarks when he was named that his first question is going to be, what does this mean for the middle class? Does this help their day-to-day lives? Not. And this is somebody talking about our national security.
And you've worked with all those people, needless to say. So, Ambassador, Joe Biden wants back into the Iran nuclear deal. How much harder was that task made by the assassination of Iran's top nuclear scientist the other day?
Well, it has undoubtedly complicated it, and the actions of the parliament, the Majlis, as it's called in Iran, and the Guardian Council, which stamped it yesterday to indeed say they're going to accelerate their program and give the United States until probably about mid-February to lift some of the oil and banking sanctions in retaliation, in part at least for that assassination. Complicates diplomacy, but it absolutely does not foreclose it. And I strongly support the president-elect wanting to re-enter this deal. And then build
was that
on
the
it.
goal? Was that the goal of the killing? While many believe it was Israel, they haven't claimed responsibility. Was the goal to make it more difficult for President-elect Biden to re-enter the deal?
There certainly has been that speculation, but I don't think the intention is really the driving force here. When you negotiate, when you try to solve a world problem, you have to deal with the facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground now are some complications. So I must say, Jim, some of the most profound complications are Iranian politics. They have an election coming up in June. It means that they're going to start focusing on that. Their parliamentary elections last year went over to the folks I call the hardliners, the very most conservative in their country. We'll see if that's the case for the presidency. But they also have an economy that's devastated and a COVID surge of their own. So it's Iranian politics matter here, too.
Well, I think the President, Trump, has called it, maximum pressure or some such thing. Have the sanctions worked, or has Iran just gotten more dangerous since we left the nuclear deal?
Well, in the 4 years that the maximum pressure campaign has gone on, Iran has increased its nuclear stockpile. It has gotten closer to what we call breakout, getting enough fissile material for one nuclear weapon. They haven't stopped their malign behavior in the region. They haven't stopped their human rights abuses. They haven't stopped putting people in Evin prison. They haven't stopped their missile development. They haven't stopped their arms dealing. So I'm not sure what the Trump strategy was. I have no idea what the outcome was that was perceived, but they certainly haven't reached it. They have definitely made things worse.
Speaking of strategy, there are reports that in early November he was talked out of a strike on some of Iran's nuclear facilities. How concerning would that be to you?
Extremely, because for a number of reasons. One, in terms of getting a nuclear weapon, we can eliminate their nuclear facilities, but then they would be most likely rebuilt underground and in secret, and be able to do so within 3 to 5 years, because you can't bomb away knowledge. They know how to do all of this. Secondly, even if someone thought you could do a quote-unquote surgical strike and just deal with their nuclear facilities, they would feel they had to retaliate. And we might get into an escalatory cycle that would lead to an Arab-Persian war, which certainly is not anything the American people want. It's not anything that increases stability in the region. As the president-elect said, diplomacy is really the only thing permanently and verifiably that can create stability.
You know, I wouldn't ask you the following question were it not for the fact you were so honest, and I loved it about your emotions in your book when talking about the negotiations. How hard was this for you personally after all these years of work when Donald Trump just dropped out of this with really no alternative game plan? How hard was that for you?
It was hard. It was hard for me, but, you know, I didn't do this alone. I did it with Barack Obama, with John Kerry, with Ernie Moniz, Secretary of State, Secretary of Energy, with a phenomenal team, and literally hundreds, if not thousands of people in the U.S. government who played a role in this. So I felt for everybody who had worked so hard for so long to make this happen. I felt badly for our negotiating partners who helped make this happen. But most of all, I felt awful for the United States, for the American people, because our security more at risk. And that was the real horror here.
Ambassador, last thing, 49 days, I think, or 48, my count may be off a day, of the Trump administration. What do you worry most about on the foreign affairs front may come out of Donald Trump's office?
I think anything is possible. I appreciate that it appears he does not want to start a war. I don't think the Supreme Leader of Iran wants to start a war. I don't think anybody's interested in war right now. There might be one or two parties I can think of who might. But I don't think really the world needs more instability. So I worry that by inadvertence or accident that we'll get into a conflict somewhere somehow. I worry that he's not putting the American people first. That's what I worry about the most. We are in a very tough COVID surge. We did not need to be here. There was no national strategy. I'm so glad that vaccines are on their way, and maybe by some get a peek at what might be normal and into the fall. But in the meantime, as was just said by the CDC, Redfield yesterday, head of the CDC, by February, we may have 450,000 Americans dead. So for me, this is our greatest national security threat at the moment. There are certainly threats ahead in terms of competing with China, Russia's ambitions and their interests. Climate, I consider a great concern for all of us. We will see more pandemics if we do not begin to deal with climate change, with energy, with the resources that we need to build a viable, safe, and prosperous future.
Ambassador Sherman, thanks for your work and for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Take care.